watching along, it is a very special first tasting for the year. We're celebrating the January Whisky of the month, and we are doing so with two legendary whiskey makers. It is the whiskey making team from Glenmorangie joining us from Scotland, from their respective very cold, I understand, mornings. How are you both?
Yes, terrific, thank you.
We're good.
I'm just fighting with a cat here in my kitchen.
Just for some added comedy value. Yes,
you know the challenges us whiskey makers have.
It's sensory. It's sensory. Well, no, if the cat's gotten feisty, it's affected it for a while. Thank you for joining us both on this fine morning for you. What's it like at Glenmorangie right now? Are you getting the snow? Are you getting the ice?
We had a lot of snow a few weeks ago, Seamus. I mean, we didn't have that much where Gillian and I lived down here near the Edinburgh area. But certainly up north, there was 4 to 5 feet of snow. Mm-hmm. And of course, it was most welcome in Scotland because, believe it or not, we've had distilleries closing down due to lack of water. And that doesn't happen very often here. But the good news is normal service has resumed and it's bloody freezing here.
It's typical January weather for UK, so very wet, windy and blustery, yeah.
Well, we're coming to you from one of the hottest days in the last few years here in Australia. And I'm saying that awfully as someone based in Tasmania. So for all the New Zealanders watching along, I apologise in advance for any of my Australian brethren's behaviour. But we're really excited because we're joining for a whiskey that has popped up in both the Australian Whisky Club side and the New Zealand Whisky Club side. We only got a tiny parcel of bottles over to New Zealand, so if anyone missed out on that side, I am ever so sorry. But for everyone watching along, please do ask questions because we've got these two. We've got Bill for most of it. We've got Gillian for all of it. I'm very excited, but they're two masters of their trade, so please get in the comments, ask questions, help me look like I know what I'm talking about because it is earnestly helpful. But I'm conscious that even though Glenmorangie is this enormous single malt brand and this incredible whiskey, this may be some people's first Glenmorangie. I think it's a perfect chance to frame up the distillery. I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of ABCs on what makes Glenmorangie special.
Yeah. Yep, of course. Do you want me to kick off, Gillian, with that? Yep, so Glenmorangie is, as you say, Seamus, one of the most famous single malts made in Scotland, and it is renowned for having a very, very complex perfumed range of flavours. There's a number of reasons for that. It's situated in the Northern Highlands. Our own private spring, the Tarlogie Spring, supplies very unusual mineral-rich water, which we believe impacts on a very vigorous fermentation. We have the tallest necks of any pot stills in the Scotch whisky industry, which of course gives a high degree of reflux. And the reflux seems to concentrate up some of the more delicate flavours in there and filters out the higher alcohols or the fusel oils. And this, of course, contributes to the perfumed delicacy of the spirit. And we also have a very robust wood management policy. So we have the barrels manufactured to our own specification using American oak. And all of these things are designed to try and create this very, very juicy, fruity, floral, perfumed tasting whiskey. So, it's a little bit like a perfume in some respects. And that's probably Glenmorangie's number one claim to fame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thrilled you've touched on those American oak casks as well, because I find so often when we're talking to either of the two of you about whiskey, we're talking about some amazing cask finish that we've come up with, and those are amazing whiskies, but it really starts from that backbone, those American oak casks. What are you guys doing that the rest of the industry isn't?
Okay, so, the vast majority of Scotch whisky is matured in barrels which have previously contained American bourbon or Tennessee whiskey, because of course our cousins in Kentucky by law have to use a new oak barrel and use it only once, whereas that's not the style we're looking for in Scotland. But at Glenmorangie, we always like to go one stage further. So we have the barrels manufactured to our own specification. Now, Gillian and I could give you a little lecture this morning on our barrels, but that would probably take...
Too early for that.
Let's go.
But suffice to say, we're looking for slow growth oak. So oak which has a more dense internal structure, therefore more flavour capacity. The wood is dried naturally in the open air, which takes between 2 and 4 years, depending on how what you're looking for. And this allows tannin to break down naturally, thus releasing softer flavours. The barrels, most bourbon barrels are given a heavy char, you know, a so-called alligator char, but ours are only given a light char, but they're given a heavy toast using heat rather than naked flame, and this penetrates more deeply into the wood and again just gives a softer, creamier range of flavors. So the whole process from start to finish typically takes up to 8 years from us pressing the button, releasing the funds to buy the barrels, and them first arriving in Scotland for filling. But we believe it's worthwhile, and we think this is one of the key factors that gives Glenmorangie just this little edge. And if any of you don't believe us and think we've just read the latest marketing manual from the company, if you do taste our flagship product Original alongside its immediate peer group, naming no names, of course, Seamus, this is a family show.
As you never have.
I think you always notice this, particularly this lovely softness and creaminess of texture, which of course makes it beautifully easy drinking.
Exactly, that's what I've got in my glass here as an Original, because we always start with Original whenever we're doing tastings, but also whenever we're deviating from anything as well. So whenever we're coming up with something new, so maybe not everybody has Original in their glass next to the one that we're talking about today, the main show. But yeah, it's always good to recalibrate. And as Bill's described, those sort of those bespoke casks that we have made make up a large proportion of our first fill bourbon casks that go into making Original. And we only use first and second fill casks for Original as well, which is also a key point. So we never use refill casks beyond that, just because, again, we're wanting to make the best whiskey that we can for our flagship. And Original's been around since the 50s and is super well known in Scotland, but also the world. It was Bill's first ever single malt, wasn't it, Bill?
Yes, way back in 1984. What were you doing in 1984, Gillian?
I was 4 years old, so everyone's now worked out my age.
So you maybe weren't tasting Glenmorangie.
Yeah, I might have had my first whiskey by then, knowing my dad and my nan. Who knows? But yeah, no, it's a glorious whiskey, and one that we're exceptionally proud of, and is our favourite one in the whiskey creation team. We're often asked that question: "What's your favourite one?" And it has to be Original, because that's what we spend most of our life looking at, tweaking, and approving as well, because obviously it's the one that we make the most of. So it's certainly. And
it's a kind of curious. So that's my cat's tail just flashing in front of me. It's a kind of curious situation, Seamus, that the main responsibility of myself and Gillian is maintaining the quality and character of both Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. So we put a lot of effort into keeping the character of Original. However, the other side of the coin is that we do our damnedest to change that as well, which of course helps us launch the rest of the range, you know, with things like Signet and 18. And of course, today, this bad boy here. So this all comes from experimentation.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And I'm very keen to jump onto that, but I just have one last question on your whiskey making approach for the both of you. It's quite unusual to have, I guess, two heads of whiskey making, working on 2 different brands in a collaborative sense. How do you divvy up projects? Does one of you get first pick? Is it passion projects the whole way through, or what are we doing?
I think that's a tricky question to answer, Seamus, and there's no hard and fast rules to that. And I'm going to obviously let Gillian give her own perspective on that. But I am accused of being many things, but structured is not one of them. And I like to just see what happens. So we don't really have a plan per se. So it's not a case like I work in Glenmorangie, Gillian works in Ardbeg. Sometimes that is the case, but I think it really just does depend what else is going on in the company. But we've got a small but beautifully formed team. We have a gentleman called David Pender, who is responsible for all of the logistics of casks. So making sure the right barrels are at the right distillery at the right time. And most importantly, also making sure that the correct barrels are selected for emptying for bottling. So I would say there isn't really one answer to that. And generally, all of us work together on the same projects. And, depending on other things, I might take the lead on one particular project, or Gillian might on others. It really just does depend. But the one thing I would say here is that one of the great things about where we work is that we have complete control over the quality of the whiskey, and the wider company and the wider organization do not mess with us. So I think it's one of the most fabulous things about being part of Moet Hennessy, that like ourselves, they put quality before anything else. So we're allowed to just get on with it. Gillian, do you want to jump in and give your view? And feel free to say no, Seamus, Bill's talking a load of rubbish.
Don't believe a word he says, no, totally. And to build on that about the quality, so that's from start to finish. So the conditions at the distillery, obviously the cask selection of what's being filled at the distillery, the barley selection as well. So so that all falls under our remit. But back to the question on projects, it is a collaborative thing, I would mostly say, because one thing you kind of need to have in whiskey is a couple of noses, actually, because what you don't want to do is be skewed and go down one path that's too skewed to one individual. So we have our immediate team, which is a team of 5 that do all the nosing and tasting. And as Bill mentioned earlier on, one of our main qualities and the main task we have to do is to ensure that the quality of all the releases under the core range for Ardbeg and Glenmorangie are exactly as they should be. But we also have a wider sensory panel as well within the company. And that's key as well, because obviously what we're producing is ultimately going to be tasted out there by the mass, as it were. And as much as we can strategize and we can analyze things in our lab all we wish, ultimately it's going to come down to nosing and tasting. So that broad sensory panel that we have within the company, we use as a testing field for almost our sort of public panel that we can test things on. So that's always good fun, because you get direct feedback from them, and that sometimes sways us, sometimes not. Sometimes it motivates us to go completely the opposite way, but it depends on what the project is. But yeah, we both work on Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, and I think having 2 whiskies that are opposite ends of the flavour spectrum is fantastic fun as well, because you can go from, like we did yesterday, Bill, we were doing some work on a beautiful, elegant Glenmorangie, and then we jumped over to do some Ardbeg, and having those extremes of flavour are really, really good as well. But just to touch on the final thing before I eventually be quiet, is that and it's down to almost the chaos theory that Bill mentioned there. So a lot of the times we get given opportunities or come up with ideas for something, a flavour change of some description, and we have no end destination for that, so it could be something at the front end of the production which we want to change to see what happens, but we know that it's not going to be out for many years to come. So we do it has no final destination, but then as time rolls on, then as we're checking in on these projects all the way through, we then start to line up potentially when they could be released, and then depending on what availability there is for opportunities, a bit like you know, you guys saying we'd love to have a whiskey, then we'll go, okay, and we have a look in our stock and see what's the most appropriate and the most fitting. So it's good fun. There's some planning. I would say you have to plan a bit, but there's also quite a bit of chaos. And I think those two things combined really has set us in good stead, really, Bill.
And it's just, Gillian's just reminded me of a couple of things there, Seamus, that firstly, talking about the panel, I mean, the wider sensory panel is full of people in the company who have all been assessed as having a good nose and palate and trained. But out with that, I always had a couple of other people I used as sounding boards. And an example of that is our former operations director, who did not have a good nose and palate. I mean, he couldn't tell the difference between a Gorgonzola and a can of cola, for example. But he was a whiskey drinker. He liked his whiskey. So we would occasionally give samples to him and say, Peter, any thoughts? And he would say, yep, I like it. Or he would say, no, I don't like it. And it was good feedback for us. But the other thing is, when Gillian was talking there about planning for new products there, we have this, well, it's not actually a physical thing these days, but I used to refer to it as the book. And if any of you are fans of the film The Devil Wears Prada, then you'll know what I'm talking about, because Miranda Priestley had the book and Gillian was responsible for having the book with all our new product ideas and development in there. But, you know, Gillian's a little bit more up to date with technology than me. So to my absolute dismay, the book is now completely digitized and online. But we have
not for everyone to see, by the way.
Oh, no. Only our team can gain access to this, but we have this file which has the details of every new product we're working on. And, you know, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them in there. But anyway, I don't think that's actually what you asked right at the start of this question.
Just got off on one, so let's get back to the point of why we're here.
I have to say, this is the best VT I've ever hosted. I have to do very little on this one. I'm really enjoying it. No, it is amazing that that you bring attention to the experimentation, because I guess we're in a position where we get to work with so many incredible whiskey makers who have so many different styles of whiskey making and different pride points and different processes. I'll never forget master distillers talking about how clean they can keep a distillery rather than the barley that they're doing and the yield that they're getting from that. And it's an incredible spectrum, but it has always come through that you guys can really drive experimentation and have room to have projects that have taken off but maybe not yet landed. And that was kind of the inception of your first pitch of this whiskey, Bill. I mean, taking us back to a boardroom in Scotland where you just walked in with a sample and then said, this is something amazing, and maybe said some more things that I won't repeat on your behalf. But do you want to take us through how this whiskey came to be?
Yep. Again, this is one of these things. So this wasn't necessarily very strategically planned, like 15 years or so ago, but it grew out of, you know, if I take it right back to basics, in 1999. So 1 year after I had become the master distiller, you know, I'd left the Glenmorangie distillery where I was manager into this role, and I made a wish list of a number of cask types that I felt would look, the cask types that would make good and interesting Glenmorangie whiskies, and right at the top of that list was Sauterne sweet wine casks. And I thought, you know, the style of Sauterne wine with these lovely honey and spicy flavors, I think that would work well with Glenmorangie. So through a contact I had in France, I managed to get hold of very quickly a small number of barriques from the mighty Chateau d'Yquem in Sauterne, which of course is the #1 sweet wine in the world. And I loved the results of that. The first release in that series was a 21-year-old Glenmorangie, which had spent 18 years in bourbon and 3 years in the Yquem barriques. And we liked that product so much that eventually we introduced it as part of the Glenmorangie core range. And of course, that's the product that people know today as the Nectar or the Nectar d'Or. But Sauterne itself is a tiny appellation, and on a good harvest, they'll fill a maximum of 2,000 barrels each year. So I always felt that that product was likely to be limited. So we started to experiment with other sweet wine barrels from around the world to see, firstly, if they would work with the product we know as the Nectar or the Nectar d'Or. But secondly, and probably more importantly, just because we could, to see what would happen. So we had barriques, Gillian, from Tokaj, from Moscatel, from Montbaziliac, from various different sweet wine producers. So what we have here today, very exclusively, in very limited quantities for your whiskey club, Seamus, is the result of one of these experiments. And when Gillian and I went back to taste this before you came to see us last year, we thought this is absolutely amazing. You know, it's a little bit different from the Sauterne in that I think the influence is a little bit more subtle, and it seems to have accentuated all these ripe fruits in there. So that's essentially the story of what we have here today.
And it's got higher strength as well. So that's a nice added bit of bonus for you as well.
Yeah, the 48.2, and I think it really carries some of that weight very, very nicely. I know the initial cask sample that Bill brought to that meeting was at cask strength. And look, you don't get to disagree with Dr. Bill Lumsden about how to bottle a whiskey, but I definitely gave it a go because it was also pretty good at cask strength. But thankfully, 48.2, Bill was obviously absolutely right. An incredible dram. Gillian, for you, because I guess for me, Bill was the initial contact point on all of this. Were you a part of this project the whole way through as well? Were you behind the scenes? What was the story?
Yeah, certainly. So so we had a few options on the table. So we would have had those in our sensory lab, and we would have both walked through those together. I can't remember precisely when it was you were over. I don't think I was involved in the meeting with the final one, but I think we probably gave you a couple of options, did we not?
More recently, yes, but for the 1 year ago, it was just this one option, and luckily we didn't need more than one option.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. Yeah, but we normally prepare a couple of options, I would say, if we're giving, because again, it depends on obviously your consumers and what you've also recently released as part of your club as well. So what we wouldn't want to do was clash. But no, this one does stand out as just being an absolute stunner. I mean, the colour alone, I don't know, I've got a blurred background, but the colour alone you can see as a glorious sort of burnished sort of copper colour. And that obviously has been from the influence of the longer finish in the Moscatel cask as well, that fortified wine, which is, I think, as Bill mentioned, it's like that super aromatic. It's got a real aromatic intensity, and I haven't tasted it yet this morning, but you can almost anticipate the additional sweetness that's been added in there by those casks. So no, it's a real stunner. And when we tasted it, we knew that it had to be going somewhere, as its small parcel of casks as it was, it made sense for it to go just to one location. So yeah, we're thrilled that you guys have ended up with it.
And it would be disingenuous of us not to say here that some of these other sweet wine casks, like Tokaj in particular and Moscatel, now find their way into the recipe of the Nectar. But this is certainly the first time we've released anything like this on its own. So this is really a one-off.
Yeah.
Having not, like, I guess, found a home for this whiskey and not knowing where it was going to land initially, where else could this whiskey have landed? Would it have become something at 20 years, or would you have started to push it towards a more mellow maturation at a sooner point?
I think, to be honest, Seamus, with a lot of these things, we get to a stage where we really like the balance of flavours between the influence of the wood and the wine, if it's a wine cask, and the new make spirit. So we just felt at this stage this was just perfect, which is one of the reasons why we selected it as an offering for you guys. Now, what we often do is, even with limited releases, we'll hold back a handful of casks, and this is just primarily for learning purposes, to see what happens. And, you know, some of them may or may not see the light of day in like 10, 15 years' time. But it's all about this. We talked about this at the beginning about Glenmorangie having a real balance and a very accessible flavour. So I'm just reading this question here from Mark Bishop there. It's a good question, Mark, and I'll come round to that in a minute. But see, sometimes when things just reach a perfect sort of range of flavors, I think, right, let's offer this up. Let's see if we can do something with this. So, I mean, this small batch that we've bottled for you, this was very much for learning, just to see what would happen, because normally we wouldn't finish for as long as this.
Yeah. But
one of the things that we have learned over the years is that with some of the wine finishes, and this has been quite a surprise to me, after 4 or 5 years, it's almost like it's gone too far.
Yeah.
But we've had 1 or 2 batches, and the one I'm thinking of, Gillian, in particular, was the Private Cask Reserve, the Pommard finish. And if you leave it in for a while, it goes down, but then it can sometimes come back again. And I think this is to do with the tannin breaking down. Now, sorry, much as I'm loving the picture of Mark up there, I can't seem to get that away from my screen. There we go.
There you go. I got you.
So I'm sorry, having something else there, as a guy, I cannot multitask at all. So yeah, that's something that I did not expect to happen, that for a whiskey basically to go over the top, but then come back again. And the same thing happened with the Sonoma-Cutrer finish, Gillian, if you remember that.
Yeah. And just to give you an idea, generally for our extra mature range, or the finish range that we have in our core, it ranges between a year's finish, 18 months to 2 years finish, I would say. So this has gone way beyond that, as it were. So it has had that opportunity to really layer up again. Another point to note is that reality is that the biggest impact you're going to get from your wood is from the first couple of years as well. And as Bill was indicating then, you know, things kind of tail off with regard to extraction from the wood then, and then it's over to oxidation and changes within that barrel, interaction between the chemical compounds that cause all these aromas, and then how those change over the course of just time, which is something that obviously you just can't rush. You just need to leave. And that's where I think things can then sort of go up and down and ebb and flow, as it were. And so
it's a very complicated picture. And you can't be empirical about it. You can't say that 5% comes from this, 10% from this, etc., etc. But in our experience, if you consider good old sherry casks, which of course are very popular in Scotch whisky industry, we believe that within the first 2 years, you get most of the influence of the sherry wine itself, which comes out of the wood and into your whiskey very quickly. And then after that, you're getting a combination of oak extractives. So parts of the oak breaking down and going into it, you know, things like tannin and lignin and hemicellulose. But you're also getting, within the fullness of time, oxidation reactions, which contribute a lot of complexity to the whiskey as well. But I'd say it's kind of difficult to say exactly how much is what, but that's our feeling there. So with this whiskey here, what we think happened is that most of the hit of the Moscatel wine would have happened in the first 2 to 3 years. And then in the next few years, it's more what's come out of the French oak in there.
Yeah.
So Seamus and guys, at 30 minutes in, I'm watching the clock here because I need to think about heading off to go and get my train up to Glenmorangie Distillery. So I am going to cheers you all. Love you and leave you, but leave you in the capable hands of Gillian, who will then take you through a tasting of this amazing whiskey in a bit more detail.
Good luck on the train, Bill.
Yes.
Keep me updated.
Thank you for joining us, Bill.
It's quite a storm here, so I'm hoping the train's actually running. But
Yeah,
we'll
maybe
soon find out.
leave the house, yeah.
We'll see you back on in 15 if it all goes
Exactly,
right.
yeah.
Okay, right. Thanks so much, all. Right, bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
Excellent. Yeah, so I can take through. I mean, I can see from the comments that many of you have uncorked your bottle, which again is one of the things that we love in whiskey. Because what we create our core range, which is to be drunk, and we also create our limited editions, which in our eyes are also to be drunk, not to be necessarily collected. So ideally, buy 2, drink 1, keep 1. But yeah, I mean, we go to all this hard work and effort to create these whiskies. So the last thing we want is for people not to drink them. We're creating them so that people can enjoy them and take the pleasure out from them. So yeah. Let's go into the actual tasting stuff. I'm going to keep mine at the strength it's at for now. I might add a couple of drops of water in a minute, because obviously that will change it. I've been flipping back between original and the Moscatel finish. So you can see not only by the colour, but also on the nose, there's a significant difference between them. There is obviously that family resemblance, which obviously comes back to how it's been distilled. All the things that Bill mentioned at the beginning, our choice of barley, Scottish only, our Tarlogie Springs, which is why we're located exactly where we are, because of that rich mineral source. So when Glenmorangie was established, it was first established as a brewery before being converted into a distillery, and it was down to the water source. You need a lot of cool, clean, cold, crisp water to make beer and whiskey. So that was our source, as it were. Then how we ferment, and also how we distill it in those tall stills. So the family resemblance is there. In the glass, you definitely get that they're from the same family, but obviously they are very different because of the influence of that Moscatel for that long finish. So on the nose, I've mentioned it already, that sort of aromatic intensity, that ripe peach, the orange, and sweet lemon, which is what you kind of expect to get in original as well, but it's kind of been dialed up again.
Absolutely.
You get lots of like floral notes in there too. And yeah, you already indicate that there's going to be quite a lot of sweetness in there. I'm really picking up quite a lot of that sort of brioche flavour as well, sort of those baked
buttery sweets.
Things, and a little bit of baked spices, which you'll definitely get when you taste it as well. I've already had a cheeky little taste. I'm going to add a couple of drops of water, because I actually haven't even had any breakfast yet, so I'm doing well. I'm having a whiskey breakfast, which I don't think is particularly responsible, but we'll gloss over that rapidly. So I've added,
you're saying it on the other side of the planet.
So I added literally a tiny few drops of water now. It would probably only bring it down to like the 46 mark. And obviously, as an individual, you choose where you want to drink your whiskey. Some people prefer it at the strength it's bottled at, or even higher, cask strength. And it depends on where your nose sits. Each person will have their sort of sweet spot that they can work really well between, and they can detect the most flavors at. This was a bit of an aside when we're doing a lot of the tastings for our approvals for our core range. We start obviously up at cask strength, the sample gets sent up from the distillery, and then we bring it down by half, and we bring it down again to practically 20% alcohol. And the reason we do that is that means that any faults or any off notes cannot hide. They're exposed to the world, and there's no hiding. So it's worth coming down a couple of times in grades just to see what you can pick up and what's different. I mean, we're doing it probably as a bit more of a technical thing when we're doing that, but it works the same when you're doing tastings as well. So you'll find your own sweet spot. So I can have a nice glug. Well, it's really silky on your palate as well. You get that real explosion of flavors on your tongue, all those tropical fruits that Bill referenced. You get this honey, syrupy sweetness as well. And I don't know about what sort of spices you're picking up, but I'm getting definitely a bit of cinnamon, a bit of sour anise in there as well. and yeah, it's just dripping with sweetness though.
Yeah, it carries this like peach skin tannin, charred pineapple sweetness to me. That's just so fun on the front of the palate. Syrupy is so the right word.
Clings. It really clings to your mouth. And again, maybe that slightly elevated ABV is allowing that to happen. I'm just looking, and again, it will be rubbish on your screen because I've got a blurred background, which doesn't help. But if you swirl your glass around, the legs that come down off this whiskey are just super slow and super thick as well.
Yeah.
I've not put too much water in yet, so they're literally just sort of coming down, and that's exactly what's happening on the inside of your mouth as well. So yeah, it's a glorious dram, and we're thrilled that you're sharing it with us because nobody else is. So well done. Yeah, it is. It's fabulous.
Mm.
So it was around about a 5-year finish for this, which is, probably double what our standard one is. And back to the question that was made earlier on about where else this could have gone into. So we were keeping these on just to see where we could go with the length of finish. But yeah, it's often the case where, we find things, especially if there's small quantities of liquid as well. And Bill mentioned the sort of the sweet spot of thing. We've actually been known to take stuff out of wood before when it's hit that note that we're happy with as well, so that it won't go any further. Obviously, it depends on the batch size. We can't have just tanks of liquid just sort of hanging around for many months. But yeah, we would have possibly incorporated this into a different limited edition, maybe. We only do a couple of limited editions a year at Glenmorangie anyway. We don't do that many. So this could have been part maybe of part of a recipe potentially that could have been released maybe in a slightly bigger quantity or something if we hadn't found a home for it. But thankfully we have.
A table of syrup, we'll take it.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about the way that you guys are treating the cask and the fact that you are confident enough to let some of that tannin mature back out because we work with so many whiskey makers and we'll often get kind of progress reports because we're planning 4 or 5 years ahead with some of these bespoke cask finishes. The moment it tastes good, there are some whiskey makers we work with that'll rack it into neutral wood as soon as possible and kind of stop that process. And then there's others that will, like yourselves, push through and see if it improves or changes dramatically. If it feels like yours is a lot more risky and a lot more terrifying, how do you battle with that every day?
Well, I mean, it's not that terrifying. We've been doing this for a long, long time, between Bill doing it for nearly 4 decades. I've been doing it for like 2 and a bit now. So we kind of know what we're doing. And we're also, you've got to try these things. You've got to push these boundaries. We do also re-rack into sort of neutralish wood as well, and there's certain things that we've had to do because they're just crazy and mad, and if we leave them in the casks any longer, it's just going to be berserk and nobody's going to want it at all, or it's going to be so intensely flavored that it's going to for us to dilute it out with standard Glenmorangie and more bourbon casks, it's going to take forever to do. And so there are experiments that, as Bill alluded to, will never see the light of day. And then there are some that we have moved out of the experimental wood into some more neutral wood. So we've got many tactics up our sleeve, and it's very much on a case-by-case basis we assess what's going on. And we've mostly focused here on the cask side of it. And obviously we get opportunities presented to us from our cask suppliers. We also go to them and give them challenges to go and find us casks that will give us this particular flavour as well. But to rewind, some of our experiments are first front end as well, Sometimes those have a bigger impact. And an example of that in our core range at Glenmorangie is Singlet, which is glorious. If I'm sure you've got it over there in your market, and it's nearly ticking towards its 20th year since its launch now, and it's absolutely like nothing else out there in the whiskey making world, I don't think.
Well, it's funny you mention it because in December we launched Signet Reserve in Australia, which is one of those whiskies that on the face of things I was like, this can't be. Signet's already a basically perfect whiskey. What possibly could Signet Reserve add to this situation?
And then
tasting it,
it's It's I know it is. It's one for, and because Signet's been out since 2008 now. We were thinking, well, we wanted to show a different side of it, as it were, and how else could we layer it up? And it's such a complicated recipe to put together. So for those of you familiar with it, you'll know that it contains this chocolate malt that's the key driver to the flavour difference. So we use a certain percentage of chocolate malt in the mash bill when we're making Glenmorangie Signet, and we do it basically about 1 week to 2 weeks production a year, and that's then laying that chocolate malt down year on year, so then we can select it in years to come for Signet itself. So the majority of that chocolate malt will go into bourbon casks, but Signet itself also incorporates new charred oak casks, also incorporates whiskey that's been finished in Oloroso sherry casks as well, and also really old Glenmorangie. So it's one of those temperamental whiskies that we put together. And just to give you an example, and Bill was on yesterday in the lab, I referenced we were doing a couple of Glenmorangies. One of them was a retweaking of a Signet. So we get hundreds of samples sent to us a year, thousands probably over the two whiskies, for us to do our core approvals. And Signet is the one that, 99.9% of them are all fine. And we've got our benchmark and we've got the one under test, and they're absolutely fine, spot on, get a pass straight away. Signet is the one that we're always like, oh, what do you think? You could do with a bit of this, you could do that. We're always tweaking and changing it ever so slightly. Anyway, back to your Signet Reserve reference. So it's an amazing whiskey, and it shows you what an impact that chocolate malt inclusion has at the front end of the process, because it keeps it all the way through the maturation, and you can actually taste that mocha sort of tiramisu chocolate flavor on your palate. So then we took Signet, we combined Signet, a batch of Signets together, and then we finished it in this PX cask. So we've made it sort of we've layered on lashings of sweetness on top of it as well. And a few more spices in there as well. You get a bit of spice anyway from the original new char oak, but the layering in of that sweet and spice element as well with the PX just takes it to that extra level as well. And we only do really tiny quantities of it as well for the Signet Reserve. So yeah, I'm thrilled that you love it, because we were very excited when it came out, and I think it's exclusive to global travel retail as well. So I think you can only really get it there, so you have to be traveling somewhere to get some at the moment, which is good and bad, I suppose.
Just be a member of the whiskey club. Pretty sure that
or
works.
Be a member of your whiskey. Exactly, there we are. No, I would highly recommend getting your lips around some if you can. So yeah.
Oh, it's insane liquid. You might have noticed in the middle of you talking about the smoothness and the fruits that you were getting from Glenmorangie that I went, and it was because I've got two glasses in front of me and I mixed them up.
Oh, did you? And there's something else in your glass that was a little of a surprise.
It was very different to a Glenmorangie, but there's been a few members that have asked about the other hat that you, of course, wear, and that's at the Ardbeg distillery. It must be such a different whiskey making philosophy for you, but there's got to be crossovers as well, right?
Well, there is. Obviously, it's all made from the same starting ingredients. And this is what's so brilliant about whiskey, is we're made from the same starting ingredients, water, barley and yeast. And then how people decide to process it through the distillery and the decisions that they make, and things like the location that they're in as well, and the fuels that they choose to use to dry their barley, give you two extremely different whiskies. And that's what I love about working for the Glenmorangie company, is I have these two hats, and they are at opposite ends of the flavour spectrum, as I referenced earlier on. So yeah, Islay is a magical place, just like Tain is as well. But it is a different place in Scotland, obviously, and it's got a different ethos. It's got a different approach to life. It is out of this world almost, and as a result, the whiskey we make there is also similar and completely different as well, and literally out of this world, having sent some to the ISS previously as well. So yeah, I'd say if anything out of the two, Ardbeg is probably slightly crazier, I would say, when it comes to experimenting. But again, because it's so robust and so that peat influence is always there, even though we've got the peaty paradox, as we like to call it, the balance with the purifier on our stills. you need to kind of have something that's quite robust to stand up to it. So sometimes our cask choices of what we're going to mature in are maybe slightly bigger at Ardbeg. We have played around with very subtle things as well, and some of those things we've released also. But yeah, two very different whiskies. There is overlap in the sense that the majority of them are both matured in bourbon, our cask of choice. I say over 90% of both Glenmorangie and Ardbeg are matured in bourbon, and we do believe that really allows them to shine at its best. And obviously with Ardbeg 10, that's wholly matured in bourbon as well. So that's our equivalent to an original over on Islay, and it's an absolutely stunning liquid.
Yes. Again, a near perfect whiskey. If Glenmorangie Signet is your temperamental dram from the Glenmo portfolio, do you have a temperamental Ardbeg that just never wants to play ball?
All of them. No, only joking. Out of the core range, I'd say. Well, I don't think. I think there's less temperamental because of that. The recipes are slightly more straightforward, and that element of chocolate malt. I'd say some of the Ardbeg days we've done in the past have gone down the Signet route, where we've changed the malt content and things like that, like we did for Ardcore and things like that. Yeah. They were quite different to work on and quite hard to get any balance on. But I'd say within the core range of Ardbeg, I think probably Ugadal is probably the one that we strive to sort of get the most consistency with where we can. And I'm sure everybody has a view on whether we hit that or not. That's always one of the main talking points in any whiskey show we go to.
Yeah, which vintage?
Yeah. And people are down to looking at the code on the bottle and saying that, this is not the same as the one I bought in 19 whatever, But I would say that the one I probably not struggle with the most, but I'd say Corrie Vrecken in the Ardbeg core range is just whoosh. I think that is the only way to describe it. It's so vibrant and peppery and, a bit mental, to be honest. So sometimes when I get a Corrie through, and especially a bit like you did there, when maybe I'm getting a Glenmorangie, I've got a couple of through the post at the same day, and I'm getting on with a Glenmorangie original, and then I've got I stick my nose in a Corrie. It certainly ensures that you're wide awake instantly. I sometimes have a bit of a mental struggle with Corrie Vrecken, but it is phenomenal, and the balance of that is all the new French oak really packs a punch and drives in all that sort of peppery white pepper, horseradish, sort of even jalapeno spice that you get in it, and that combined with the peat is something that is memorable, certainly.
That desperately makes me want a Corrie Vrecken. In my books, there are two kinds of people in this world. There's Oogie people and Corrie people. Yeah. And I'm a Corrie person. I'm very happily a Corrie person.
There we go. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's very true. Yeah.
There is some comments flooding around about how nice it would be if we had an Ardbeg. For everyone in the comments, please tell us what kind of cask you'd like to see. Maybe we can inspire Gillian into some ideas. I mean, are you working on anything that we can reveal?
Wow. Ooh. We're always working on something. So we work in the future a lot of the time with stuff from the past, so we're time travelers. So yes, I can reveal rather nicely that we will be getting an Ardbeg, which is very exciting. So the next one that you're going to get from the Glenmorangie company is going to be an Ardbeg. I don't know how much I'm going to reveal at this point. Oh, they are. Seamus is giving a little bit of a clue
comfortable
away.
As I am revealing.
Oh, that's practically giving the whole thing away. But
what does that mean?
With Seamus and the team over in Australia, and we're thrilled to be able to offer you that. We actually did give a couple of options on this one, which was good, and we did a bit of a tasting whereby we allowed you guys to select the final one. So we put forward a few that we thought were certainly good enough to represent the Ardbeg name, and I think I can only but assume you're going to love it, because we loved it when we tried it. And yes, I shall say nothing now, because otherwise you won't have us back on to do another tasting when it gets released. So
that's not the way this works. You're going to be bombarded with requested tastings. You don't get to do one and done.
You can quiz Bill again. He's over, I think, hopefully this year in your market. So you can pin him down. He's a very soft touch. He'll spill everything.
I've prompted so many questions from the audience, and I'm going to say we've already said too much. I'm not going to say anything more. But I think he'll be quite happy with all of the answers. We will have Bill visiting. We hope to have you visiting at some point soon as well. I know we're also working on Glenmorangie things, and it's funny because I think we actually have a meeting next week to work out what we're working on.
I don't know if the samples are going to be with you by next week. I don't know.
Good.
I'm not sure. I think they've definitely left us, but I don't know where they are, to be honest. They're probably en route. So, yeah. Planning ahead. We like to, we are, as much as Bill represented the fact we're chaotic, we do obviously have a slight plan.
Sure. Yeah. It was one of the growing pains. I think the Whisky Club and the Glenmorangie Company have worked on 5 whiskies of the month now, maybe 4. I can't imagine what I'm forgetting. And it was tough to initially work out that whiskies of the month need to be in the country on a certain day at a certain time, which is quite a unique distribution challenge. And that means the whiskey has to be ready and matured at a certain time. And I think it's short no length. But we have gone through a real tour of whiskey styles over the years. I mean, our first one was the Malaga Barrel Select.
Okay.
Our second was a Cab Bowl 15-year-old.
Cab Bowl Estate. Yes.
Another example of innovating right at the start of things.
Yeah.
And then the first one that we kind of worked on exclusively was the Amontillado cask, which was another incredible dram. It's been very exciting, and the question I'm about to ask you is also teasing for me because I don't know the answer. What kind of things do you want to take the Glenmorangie direction in next? Make broad themes. Is there anything that you want to show off to Whisky Club members?
I don't know necessarily if any of these will come to you for a good number of years, but we obviously have it up at Glenmorangie. It's one of the reasons why Bill's also going up north is we have our experimental distillery up at Glenmorangie as well, called Glenmorangie Lighthouse, where we've basically got our own little toy distillery. It's a full-scale distillery, but it's for us to sort of play and trial things with a view to take things to a bigger scale at the main distillery if we sort of strike gold or find something that particularly tickles our fancy. Because it's quite hard to do front-end production at scale at a distillery whilst also trying to produce enough liquid to keep your stocks full for the coming years as well. So there's lots of very unusual things that we're doing in there. They're obviously going to take some time to mature. So they're things for way down the line, as it were. But as we alluded to earlier on, we have a whole host of opportunities that we've said yes to in the past, or opportunities that we've made happen at the distillery in the past, which are now coming through and maturing. So those could be front-end changes that we've made, different fermentations, different yeasts, as well as then different types of casks that we've had opportunities for as well. So the other thing to maybe look at is different combinations of casks as well, because obviously I think the majority of what you've had have just been wholly matured in one type. But of course, there's a whole array of casks that you can choose to bring together that complement each other in different ways. So who knows? We might try to do a few more of those going forward as well.
Oh, all right. Very, very, very exciting. I'm going to quickly check the questions for anything we haven't really touched on. Make sure we're all good, because there has been so many comments and questions coming through.
That's good. That means that people are enjoying themselves, hopefully, and enjoying the whiskey.
They're lucky. I should hope so. It's an absolute delight to have you. Some wonderfully niche questions. Quick one here from Glenn Duncan, our local Tasmanian whiskey geek. The Royal Dornoch 400-year celebration bottling. Did Glenmorangie make it? That's a tough one, isn't it? I've hit you with a hardy.
Is it a single cask? I think it
must be.
Is it a single cask? We could well have done an association with it. It rings a bell. I'd have to look it up, to be honest.
Very fair, and we can answer in the comments.
Yeah. I know that obviously that's our local golf club, and we have done stuff with them in the past where they have had bottles for sale in the club, as it were. We might well have done something with them on sold them a private cask or something like that. I'll have to check. Wonderful
question here about when things go wrong. experimental drams that won't see the light of day. Have you ever had to take something out the back and shoot it or redistill it in the whiskey can?
Yeah, we have still got some of these cars that are and Bill was on. He would definitely bring up the example of when he first ever used Tokai casks, because he had them in and they went. I think they went over the top. They went too far, and they went, the point at which he couldn't use them. And then he repeated the experiment then some years later, and monitored a lot more closely that time. And that actually ended up being one of our private edition releases. So there are still a few casks, and there are still a few casks that aren't necessarily within the rules of the Scotch Whisky Association as well, which we've just filled just for fun, just to see what the flavours are, but we can't release them as whiskey because they don't adhere to the regulations. So we've got a few of those things knocking about as well. And there's been the odd, as you're going through casks, especially if you're putting together small batches or individual single casks, you obviously come across casks that have faults as well. And that's one of the biggest sort of challenges for us as blenders, to try to work out either, is it beyond the point of no return, in which case you can just choose to get it destroyed, which is a shame, yes, or is it, how much of an influence does it then have if you combine it at a small quantity into a batch, but only at like 2%, 5%, 10%? Where can you push that to so that you can still use the liquid, but it's being mixed and blended in with other casks so that, you can't note the influence of either that fault or those flavors that aren't necessarily as complementary. So that's almost the point of a blender, is to try to work out a way of incorporating some of those things without the end consumer even realizing. But touch wood, and I have got a wooden desk underneath my thing here, we are in a fortunate position where we pay such close attention to every single aspect of the process from start to finish, that the opportunity for things like that to happen and faults and errors are slimmed down quite considerably.
I completely understand, but my goodness, even to try a failed experiment is a wonderfully exciting idea.
Yeah.
It's been amazing to catch up with you, and great to talk through this whiskey. I'm very excited to talk through more whiskies in the future. I think there's some really exciting things coming along. I know the members have had a terrific time. I might start to wrap it up, but I would love to ask you before I do you have any parting thoughts, any final things to say on the Glenmorangie, on this whiskey, on anything at all?
Well, I'm just thrilled. I'm just looking at a few of the comments coming at the side here, and we've got some New Zealanders chipping in there as well. I love the fact that it's such a thrill as a whiskey maker to see your product being enjoyed at the other end of the process. And these things have been a long time in the coming, a long time in the making as well. So as much as anything, I would just say thank you very much for having made the connection with us and having got this whiskey as far on the opposite side of the world to where I'm currently standing, which is thrilling, to think that we're chatting to each other and we're enjoying something that was put together 13 years ago, and it's bringing us all together in something that we all collectively love. So just keep that going, really, because it's a wonderful thing to have, and long may it continue.
Absolutely. Well, on behalf of myself and all of the club members, I want to raise an enormous Glenmorangie glass to you for joining us this morning, especially since it's freezing there. Good on you for joining us.
I'm a little bit warmer now, anyway.
And to all the members watching along in New Zealand and in Australia, I want to raise a glass to you as well. Thank you for joining us tonight for this dram.
Cheers. Slán
Slán indeed. And for all the Australian members watching along, there is still a handful more bottles of that Signet Reserve. If it's really burning a hole, I think I've just seen that it's still on the site as well. So a massive cheers for the folks watching along. As always, next month's bottle is on the house, and some glassware. That's going to Mark Bishop in Australia, so credit to you. And Natasha McGill, Tash, good to see that you're on the stream as well. Massive cheers to you as well. For everyone watching along, and thank you for being here at the Whisky Club, and cheers, keep dramming.
Thank you, bye.